The Eye of Horus. This is definitely one of the most important symbols in ancient Egyptian history. Despite its almost 5,000 years of existence, or maybe because it's so old, the symbol still interests people today. You can find it as charms, tattoos, and even on bathroom walls. Some people think it has powers to heal and protect, while others believe it holds hidden knowledge from ancient Egyptians. But what can we be sure about when it comes to this symbol? What do history and archaeology really tell us about its meaning? I'm Omar Sharyad, a historian, and in this video we'll find out, what do old clues tell us about the stories, looks, and uses of this symbol? The Egyptian word for this symbol is the Eye of Horus, because of the stories linked to it. In Egyptian stories, Horus is a god connected to kingship. He's the son of Isis and Osiris. In old writings, Osiris was the first ruler of Egypt, but he was betrayed and killed by his younger brother Set. After that, Horus, the rightful heir, fought battles with Set to bring back his father's dynasty. These battles explain why the Eye of Horus is so important. So what happened exactly, according to an old story named The Contendings of Horus and Set? From around 1100 BC, Set took out Horus's eyes during a fight and buried them near a mountain. Then the goddess Hathor, linked to motherhood and fertility, found Horus's eyes. She poured the gazelle milk over them, and the next morning they turned into lotus flowers. Another version of this story, from a later writing called the Papyrus of Humilhar, says that after Set took out Horus's eyes and buried them, Isis, Horus's mother, watered them, not Hathor, and they sprouted in the form of the first vines, from which the first wine would have been made. It's worth noting that both lotus and wine were always offered to the gods in Egypt. We'll come back to this point when we discuss the symbolic use of the Eye of Horus. But before that, we need to consider an even older mythological version related to this symbol. This version is found in the famous pyramid texts and the Book of the Dead, which are texts dating back to the early days of Egyptian civilization. According to these texts, the Eye of Horus wasn't restored by Hathor or Isis, but by Thoth, the god of writing, knowledge, and also associated with the moon. In the enchantment 17 of the Book of the Dead, for instance, Thoth says the following words: "I have restored the sacred eye which was injured on the day of the fight between the rivals." In the pyramid texts, this sacred eye is also called the lesser eye, and it's said that it was reduced by the finger of Set. The text doesn't exactly explain what it means by reduced or lesser eye, but Egyptologists often see a connection here with the moon. The supposed reduction of the eyes could refer to the fact that the moon wanes or gets smaller, at least according to our observations from Earth. The restoration of the eye could then symbolize the moon's regrowth or waxing. Moreover, the term lesser eye seems to suggest the existence of another eye, the greater eye. This might fit into an astronomical interpretation. If the lesser eye is the moon, the greater eye would likely be the sun. Together, they could be the two great eyes of the celestial god Horus. Speaking of the celestial god, we can now start analyzing the form of the symbol itself, which is possibly also linked to the sky. Recognizing the Eye of Horus isn't hard, even though there are many stylized versions. In antiquity, this symbol always had distinct features that set it apart from any other eye. There are basically 6 parts that make up the Eye of Horus: the center of the eye, the right and left sides, the eyebrow, the short vertical line, and the long diagonal line. Each of these parts holds its own significance. It was even used in Egyptian writing as a kind of hieroglyph, and according to some Egyptologists, each of these parts represented a fraction. They were used to record measurements like the weight and volume of grains. But why exactly these 6 parts? Well, the truth is, there's no ancient text that directly explains this shape. However, there are some interesting theories. One theory that's quite popular online is that these lines might reference the human brain, when you look at the brain in a sagittal cross-section, which is like a middle cut. It does seem to have some significant similarities with the Eye of Horus. You can see something like the eyebrow, the eye, the short vertical line, and the long diagonal line curving outward, similar to the Egyptian symbol. Because of these resemblances, some people believe that the Eye of Horus shows advanced knowledge of ancient Egyptian medicine and anatomy. Some even say that this reference to the brain could represent hidden knowledge about the interaction between the body and the spirit through the pineal gland. But does this similarity really point to an anatomical reference, or is it just a coincidence? The major issue with this theory of the Eye of Horus, representing the brain, is that there's no mention of this symbol being associated with the brain in ancient texts, images, monuments, or papyri. Also, the Egyptians didn't seem to consider the brain a sacred organ or anything like that. In their mummification process, for example, they didn't treat the brain as significantly as the heart. They would remove the brain using a hook through the nose and discard it. In contrast, the heart was often treated with special salts and placed back in the body. Sometimes it was even protected by a special amulet. I mention this because the physical body held great importance in the Egyptian afterlife beliefs, and how they treated different body parts during the mummification process provides clues about their significance. In this funerary context, the brain is never mentioned as the seat of the soul or connected to the transcendent in any way. It's the heart that holds such significance. This symbol appears in funerary texts as the center of vitality and even memory of the person. For these reasons, very few Egyptologists today support the brain hypothesis. Most prefer another explanation that seems to fit better with what we actually know about Egypt and the god Horus. More specifically, Horus' eye is often represented as a falcon, or with a falcon's head. Falcons were associated with the sky and the sun. In Horus falcon depictions, there are distinct marks around its eye, a vertical lower line and a sideline. These marks are consistent whether it's a statue, a relief, or a painting. These details likely reference the peregrine falcon, a bird that can still be seen in Egypt today. If you look closely at the eye region of this bird, you can see marks that resemble the Eye of Horus. While it's not confirmed that this falcon is the exact inspiration for the Eye of Horus shape, for me and for most Egyptologists, this falcon theory is more convincing than the brain theory. Now, in the first part of the video, it was mentioned that the myth of the Eye of Horus turning into lotus and vines would be discussed. This hasn't been talked about yet because it's less about the shape of the Eye of Horus and more about its use and importance in Egyptian religion. Let's talk about that now. The objects appearing on the screen are funerary stelae, a common artifact in ancient Egypt containing funerary texts. These texts often include offering formulas believed to help the individual in the afterlife, allowing them to partake in the divine table. A fascinating detail about these stelae is that the eyes of Horus are always present at the top, in the pyramid texts mentioned earlier. This symbol is also connected to the theme of offerings. This includes offerings to both the deceased and the gods, as well as the primordial offering that Horus made to Osiris, the deceased god. This special offering contained lotus flowers and wine, along with other foods and scents. In the image you can even see the Eye of Horus making an offering to Osiris, with Horus the falcon right there observing. In ancient Egyptian belief, these offerings were seen as a way for Horus to invigorate his deceased father in the afterlife, protecting and strengthening this god in the afterlife. In a broader sense, all offerings in the context of ancient Egyptian rituals were connected to the themes of revitalization, protection, restoration, and sacredness. The Eye of Horus, with its main meaning centered around offerings, condensed all these ideas. This is why it was considered an especially powerful symbol. People could carry it as amulets or write it on walls and objects to protect, restore, heal, and invigorate themselves. In essence, that's what the Eye of Horus meant in the myths and rituals of ancient Egypt. The restored strength of a god, the power given to both gods and the deceased, and the divine strength benefiting mortals. However, like any symbol, its meaning has changed over time. Even today, it continues to be adapted and reinterpreted in drawings, esoteric groups, tattoos, and even on bathroom walls. If you find this video interesting, please click the like button and leave a comment. It greatly helps in promoting the video and supports this kind of content on the platform. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.